Hello everyone. This is the concluding session for this course. I hope you enjoyed the course. We tried to make it dense in terms of content, and I hope you enjoyed the entire lecture series. So the way we are going to conclude this lecture, so we thought that we'll have a panel discussion where we will discuss different aspects of LLM research in industry as well as in academia, and the way people actually look at these problems, right? So we have with us eminent researchers from both industry and academia as well as students, and the way we will essentially follow this panel discussion is that we will ask a few questions, right, to all the panel members, and we will get their views. Okay, I hope the answers that we get from the panelists will essentially help students and listeners, audience understand the current landscape of LLM in India and across the world. Okay, so with this, let me start. My name is Tanmoy. I'm a faculty member at IIT Delhi. I work in NLP. So welcome you all to this panel discussion. So I request you to introduce yourself very briefly. You just introduce your research very briefly, and maybe we will take it from there.
Okay. Hello everyone, I'm Yatin, and I'm working in the conversational AI team at IBM Research. Currently, I'm focusing on fine-tuning language models for a specific client or on a domain-specific corpus.
Hi, I'm Gaurav Pandey, and I'm working as a research scientist at IBM Research. And my current research focuses on reinforcement learning and search techniques and incorporating search techniques during training for language models.
Hi, I'm Suresh Dasgupta. I'm a professor at Dhirubhai Ambani Institute of Information and Communication Technology. My research area is trying to understand to what extent large language models have personalization capabilities in different types of downstream NLP tasks, and also trying to figure out whether we can build energy efficient smaller models which are specialized for personalization tasks.
I am Anvay. I'm a PhD student at IIT Delhi, and I mostly work on interpretability of different capabilities of LLMs, trying to understand how LLMs work, as making them as a white box instead of a black box. Yeah.
Thanks very much. So my first question to my friends from industry, from IBM. We have witnessed last 2-3 years, huge size models, right? Those models are designed by all industry giants like IBM, Microsoft, Google, Anthropic, and so on and so forth. So what are the most pressing challenges in deploying these LLMs in real world applications? What do you think, Yatin?
So, right, I think we can bifurcate the question and the answer into two parts, right? One is in terms of the scale, right? Imagine a couple of years ago or 5-10 years ago, when a company would deploy a model, it would be on-prem. It would be a neural network which would be deployed on-prem, and they will train on their specific data and so on and so forth, right? But now with such big large language models, this is unthinkable, right? Now
we as academicians can't think of deploying it. So maybe industries have different.
Yes, but many small-scale industries, right? They will not have capabilities to develop these language models on their own.
Right.
So that is why you will see, that is why these are being served as a service. We have language model as a service.
Right.
If you're trying to deploy on-prem, then that requires another level of expertise, right? VLLM technologies like VLLM have helped in simplifying that, but still that requires different expertise, right? So they are being run on the cloud by a few experts, and that brings in a lot of challenges. For example, there is a challenge of privacy. Client's data is going on the server.
Right.
Can they trust it or not? There are other challenges, right? So this is one aspect of it, which is this in terms of scale. Right now, going forward, language models are going to be as service. We will not have. It will be difficult to have small language models, right? The second challenge is intrinsic to the language models themselves. So, for example, the biggest challenge that I see at present is that of hallucination. Currently, the way language models are used, you always have a verifier at the end. they are not working in an autonomous fashion, right? Without, if there is an adversary at the end, then you are doomed, right? For example, if there is a chatbot deployed by the company and there is a client who is trying to dupe the company, then he can do that. Right. So hallucination is the biggest challenge at this point in time. How do you control? How do you put rail guards on it? So I think these are the things.
Okay.
That I see.
Okay. Thank you, Gaurav. So we all know that these LLMs are, data hungry. I mean, they need a lot of data sets, right, for training. So how do you? I mean, in industry, how do you think of addressing problems like data scarcity, like representation, legal concerns, right? As Yatin was mentioning, that if some of the private data is leaked, then you are gone, right?
Right.
So how do you address this copyright privacy issues?
Right. So
And this is more important from industry perspective, because again, from academia side, we don't care much because we always work with publicly available data sets which are presumed to be cleaned or whatever, right?
Correct.
But industry, you have private data from customers, right? Yeah.
Right. So there are two parts. The first part was about, I think, how do you deal with data scarcity, right? And in recent years, synthetic data generation has come a long way. Actually, it started with chain of thought data generation, and now people are using search techniques to get even better, higher quality data, and fine tuning the models on using that. So things like approaches like A-star and stuff have been able to address the problem of data scarcity to some extent. In terms of representing,
but do you, sorry to interrupt, but do you think the synthetic data generation problem or the synthetic data generation models, right, would always be helpful for applications like healthcare, for example, or very specific applications which is not very prevalent, right? Because at the end of the day, you'll basically have to have some automatic way of generating text which may be readable, right?
Right. So domain specific synthetic data, again, if the task is that you have a bunch of documents, medical documents, and you have to answer queries related to documents, that can be done. Like you can feed those documents, convert them to question answer, train your model on top of those question answers that you created from the documents. So that can be done to some extent. Similarly, tasks related to document summarization related to the medical documents or finance documents, that also can be done using the synthetic data approaches. So
you feel that synthetic data generation is the way to go?
It might be. There needs to be a verifier, a human being who should be able to judge the data and see if it is of sufficient quality, and also the model that you train, it should be able to answer the queries that you care about, right? So currently it appears that the data might be the way to go. That's
okay. And what about the copyright issues and other ethical concerns?
Right. The issue of having diversity in the data, representation in data, that in some way that probably requires more careful data, getting the data from different sources, basically ensuring that you are getting the data from that represents different views, also represent different groups, so that there is enough representation. Now, the last part, which is basically ensuring that dealing with copyright stuff, I think that is a bit more challenging, and there is something called federated learning where you try to do training and inference on premise, basically where you don't share the data, but
infer something.
Correct. And you basically the net your part of the data stays on your machine, and that you do training on that part. So there are approaches that deal with it. Other concerns, by ensuring that data that you use is not copyrighted, is something that is looked by the legal team.
Okay. Yeah, got it. Thank you. So before moving into stories, maybe let me again get back to Yatin. So Yatin, what do you think? Like the way the way this industry academia collaboration is happening, right? do you know from India's perspective, right? We need more such industry academia partnership. And sometimes I have seen, being an academician, I have seen that industries, although they are willing to collaborate with academic folks, but they are also a bit hesitant in terms of sharing data, in terms of sharing ideas, because of these IP issues and so on and so forth. But the way LLM research is happening, I firmly believe that there is always, I mean, we always need a strong industry academia collaboration, right? So how can industry academic partnership be improved to accelerate research while ensuring practical applicability?
So I think this is a very pertinent question, especially in today's era, right? I mean, a couple of years ago, we could think of academic research independently. But I think going forward, it's going to become more and more difficult. The kind of resources which are required for doing research, academia may not be able to afford. And that is where industry comes in, right? In terms of A, giving good resources, and B, coming up with pertinent problems as well, right? Because industry people are more close to the problems which are being faced by the clients and in the real world applications, right? So this is where industry will come in, and now this collaboration has to strengthen. Otherwise, that will be bad for both industry as well as academia. Academia will be short of resources, and industry will be short of maybe good talent and that independent thinking which comes with academia, right? This is true that when you are collaborating with industry, unfortunately, because of business needs, most of the focus is toward client specific problem, whereas in academia you would need free thinking and blue sky research as well, right? So there definitely is a gap. And I think programs like AIHN, which IBM has, I believe more and more such programs should come up, and other industry and other companies should also promote such programs where there is enough freedom for the academic research. And in the end, I mean, in the long run, it always helps, right? It's not always about solving the current problem at hand within the industry as well, right? So I think leaders within the industry also need to envision and think that you cannot make big progress by taking just small step and the immediate next step. You definitely need blue sky research, which that perspective comes from academia.
Right.
I think that is very crucial. It's going to be very crucial. Otherwise, it's going to be bad for both industry as well as academia.
That's what I also feel. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Just to continue with this discussion, Gaurav. So recently I visited one of the leading industries in India. Okay, I don't take the name. But then I realized that I was talking to some of the researchers there, and I realized that that industry, they actually don't allow the breakthrough research to be published. Right? They don't allow them to publish good techniques, for example, which they invent. Right? They keep it confidential. They keep it secret because they essentially want to deploy those techniques to their own LLMs, right? And they only allow researchers to publish, let's say, dataset centric papers, or like those innovations which don't have high valued intellectual property, right? Now, let's say when a good PhD student, after completing PhD, joins such industries, right? They would also they might feel a bit frustrating because they also feel that their innovations will be published, right? And the way this LLM race is going on, right? I have seen many of such cases, not one industry, many industries. They actually keep their confidential thing. I mean, their high valued research confidential and low valued research published.
Correct.
Right? So what is your opinion on that? Because if this continues, then I think the talented PhD students, they would also think twice before joining industry. They would think that, okay, let me stay back in academia and let me continue this work.
Yeah.
Have you seen the same thing in your industry?
No, at least at IBM, this is not a thing.
Okay.
I think this is happening right now because people feel that there is a lot of money to make out of using live.
People are insecure, I think.
Yeah, so people feel that there is a huge amount of money that is available, and if you have the algorithm to
Gaurav, there is something called first movers advantage, right?
Yeah.
Even if you even if you publish, right? I mean, these days the way people write the paper, there are many gray areas that you don't reveal, right?
Correct.
You already you already built this thing, you already deployed this thing, and then you basically communicated your paper.
Correct.
So you already have a first mover advantage. Then why people are so scared?
I think so. I mean, with many of the companies, if they found an algorithm better than what they have currently, they will probably release the current algorithm. I think. I mean, so. So as you said, the first mover thing. I think I am guessing many of the companies will be happy to release things that they believe is now worse than what they have currently.
The outdated one.
The outdated ones, yeah. So I think that slowly the craze around this LLMs will.
Slow down?
Yeah, it will calm down actually.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll still have a good research coming out of it, but hopefully people will realize that. I mean, this race will slightly flatten, and then because we know before
2 years, 3 years, 5 years,
It's impossible
I don't
to
see any hope.
before 2020, before this ChatGPT came out, everybody was happy to share all their research,
Right.
and everybody was. I mean, the research. There was no such secrecy among the research labs.
Right.
And this is just a recent phenomenon when people are realizing that maybe there is a lot of money to make out of it. Yeah. So yeah, but it's not good for.
Open source
Yeah, it's not good for open source and also not good for research in general, right?
yeah.
Research will progress at a much
Science
slower
in
pace.
general.
Yeah. So science will progress at a much slower pace, and the boundaries will be pushed much slower than they could, because there's a limited number of people in a research lab. How much? There's a limit to how much they can innovate and how much they can do.
Thank you. By the way, so while I am asking these questions to some to individuals, feel free to give your opinion. So moving to Sauris. So again, a distribution change, right, from industry to academia. So we academicians always feel very difficult to teach courses like NLP these days, right? Because how to teach, because we have statistical NLP and now all this LLM based research, LLM based NLP, right? And sometimes it is not possible to teach NLP in both the semester. You don't have the liberty, right? So how do you think how one should teach NLP these days? Do you have some suggestion?
See, the way I usually do it, like I used to teach one classical NLP course, and then the following semester I would teach a neural NLP course. I just finished one.
That may not be possible.
Yeah. And like as an example, in our own university, they scrapped off the classical NLP.
Yeah.
So now what I've done is that what I'm thinking, even in this semester, what I've done is the very first few lectures, I would make them ground in the more the basic elements of classical NLP, starting from linguistic properties, morphology, all of that, syntax, and then
So 1 month is gone.
not 1 month.
With this.
Not 1 month, but 3 weeks definitely.
3 weeks, definitely. Right.
Yeah.
Huh.
But at the same time, while working on those topics, I would also teach them how these heuristics can be used to design neural models. Right. Like particularly how one can use them as inductive biases into models and do interesting things. And then I would move into the what to wake and all of those sort of things. But at the same time, I also make sure that
HMM CRF.
yeah. So that's where I'm coming. So at the same time, I also make sure that how they can interpret these, let's say, word to wake and other kind of models, how one can interpret them in a probabilistic manner. Like, let's say that what's the correspondence between these models and probabilistic graphical models like CRF or HMM or so on. Yeah, and in that way, I sort of not in the depth. Definitely, I can't go into the depth of the different algorithms and so on and so forth. But at least some idea of what used to happen and what is the reflection of that in modern architectures. And also recognizing those elements which were there in classical NLP, recognizing those elements in the newer architectures, and trying to give them a perspective, a linguistic interpretation of how these neural models, how to interpret these neural models in a more linguistic fashion. So that usually I try to look at it that way.
Okay, cool. The second question to you is, Again, from academic perspective, we have constraint in terms of computing facilities and stuff like that, right? Data sets also.
Right.
So how do you envision the role of academic institutes in fostering open research on LLMs? Because
I think first of all, either at a state level or at an university level, there has to be a consortium, and government has to come forward and set up consortium in terms of data centers where we can share resources depending upon a few such projects are coming up, but I think more and more such projects should come out I think state level is a better way, that every state should have their own resources installed. And I think
sharing is also going to be tough, right?
Yeah,
particularly countries like India.
Right.
Although, let's say, hypothetically assume that the state government will implement something, will have some data centers, but who will maintain this, and how would the other institutes basically share that resource?
Right. So basically, maintenance cannot be done by the university people, or it has to be some dedicated government. It can be taken up by government agency itself, that they maintain the resources and all, and also the sharing and all of that. Like if what I was thinking of like this way, I'm not an expert in this, but if library resources can be, there is InflipNet and all, so if library resources can be shared across the country, why not at a state level?
Right.
Why not? Because and also that not everybody is doing high-end LLM research and all of that, so why not queue it up and do it that way? And I think the IITs and the ISTs have to take the lead in setting up these sort of things.
I mean, in that aspect, I would actually go with what Yatin mentioned, right? I mean, personally, what I do is that whenever I feel that I need, I want to do something for which I need large resources, I just go and talk to industries, right? And they are actually happy to collaborate. Number one, because they also feel that this is important, in academic collaboration is important. Number two, they also have resources which they actually want to share happily. And I've been successful over the years, like with industry support from Google, from IBM, from Adobe, and so on and so forth. I think they are also, along with state support, I think industry support might also be
right.
Things are becoming obsolete at a very high rate.
Yeah, that is.
How do you take care of that? Right?
So,
I mean, there's
I know.
HPC in IIT Delhi, right? It had a lot of K40s.
800 is obsolete. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
I was thinking of buying
that is another argument.
800 is no longer there. You have to buy each 200.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So,
that is another argument that right. I think that is another argument that our institution keeps giving, that okay, let's imagine we tell Reliance and we can buy this, then what? I mean, what if when things get obsolete?
So from that perspective, industry, I think, is better placed at utilizing those resources and generate some revenue out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So you don't have resources sitting idle. Right. At the same time, you have some bandwidth which you can utilize for academic collaboration as well. So we have to think about how to monetize that. Even if government pitches in, there has to be a plan for monetizing that as well.
Right. Otherwise it won't work. Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Moving to online. So set up different questions, right? So from students' perspective, right? So you have been working on LLMs. And you have also been, I think, reading papers published by other labs outside India, right? So I always, motivate students to stay in India and continue their PhD, right? For example, Yatin did from IIT Delhi, he did from ISC, you are doing in IIT Delhi, right? So, and all of your research is actually very, very good, very, very motivated, influential. So why you think that, so the kind of tradition, right, that after BTech, after undergrad, you actually want to go abroad for PhD versus you actually want to stay here, right? Do you see a major difference in terms of research quality, number one, and number two, in terms of prospect, job opportunities, and your future growth? So what do you think about it?
I guess it's a kind of a historical side effect to it. when it started, say in 2005-6, that time, that age, India was not properly placed in terms of this IT resources. But I guess nowadays things are changing with all the big techs having their research labs in India. And over the friends or seniors I have, I guess a lot of people who have done their PhDs from, say, these top institutions have joined industries apart from academia. Previously, we used to see that most of Indian PhD students used to go to academia because there were no industry. So I guess things are changing. There are not much difference in terms of research quality. Of course, there is difference in terms of the volume of research, which is very understandable because countries like US, they have, say, 100 institutions working on a field compared to India, where maybe we
in
have
a lab
10.
there are 30 PhD students, 40 PhD students.
We are working at a much smaller scale than them.
But if you normalize it, if you normalize the quantity in terms of number of students, right?
Yeah, but when we see at conferences, like nobody normalizes. Like when we go to any conference, say any top conference like in Europe, ACL, we always see that at least 60-70% students are either Chinese or US.
or
So
Canada.
Indians are less over there, or the people who are there are mostly US PhD students because it's understandable about the volume. So I guess things are changing, but I guess students are not aware of the shift, especially in field in CS or more specifically in NLP. I will talk. I guess we are kind of now at par at a more like normalized
So
level.
what would be your advice to the students who are now applying to the US for their PhD, and I'm just submitting LORs every day, 15-20 LORs every day.
I guess they should start.
And the most interesting part, Anna, is that all the students who are applying, for them I'm writing LORs, they have already published 2-3 papers with me in their undergrad, but they still think that our lab is not their next place.
It's somewhat about both the brand value and how do we need better marketing, I guess.
Well, IITs also have brand values, right? I mean, of course, we don't compare ourselves with Stanford CMU, but if you look at, let's say, second tier, third tier institutes in the US, we actually are better in terms of QS ranking.
Yeah,
I think it might also have to do with exposure. The students that are studying outside, they get a lot of exposure in these research labs that are there, OpenAI, and all the research labs, and they do internship every year over there. So maybe that's
here also we have exposure. For example, let's see if somebody wants to go to IBM or let's say Google, they always recruit interns. Right?
I think
now
my because I've done my PhD over there. I've done my PhD over there, and I have half of my family over there, and I'm seeing what's going on. I think also another reason is that there is still this lingering myth. It's basically a myth that life is going to be a lot better over there. Once you go over there, and it's a complete myth. And I'm a practical example of coming back to India immediately after my PhD. So I didn't even have spend much time to realize that. So
for the time being, sorry, if we assume that the life is better there, why not doing PhD from India and go there after doing PhD? Let's say postdoc and settle down.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that they have. These kids have that's a much upstream task in the sense of landing in US without having a US degree. And that's sort of like a common notion, a general notion that is maybe a bit difficult to settle in there.
Okay, so the second question to you is, what are the unique challenges you face while working on LLM research as a student, especially balancing ambitious ideas with resource constraints?
Yeah, like as Jatin was also mentioning, it's always a good idea to collaborate with the industry during PhD, and probably that has helped me a lot in my journey because obviously there are areas like which are still academicians can pursue with comparatively low resources, like things like evaluations of LLM, which maybe industry are not that much interested in, but there are a lot of complaints. How do you evaluate a particular LLM and things like that? So maybe things like that, and also we work on interpretability. We start with toy models, which are a GPU is not required. Maybe a collab is enough. So problems like that, obviously one can start, but when you go to more ambitious things, tweaking with the model, doing more designing new methods or say alignment, fine tuning, you need resources, because at least for publishing papers, reviewers are every time like, why don't you try with 70 million models? So we need resources, but I think it's always a good idea to collaborate with industries. Unfortunately, nowadays in India, at least in the field of LLMs, I see we always collaborate with all the big techs. So I think that's a plus point.
And I think resource constraint also gives you a different perspective, right? For example, I always give this example that we were able to send a spacecraft to moon with less budget of a Hollywood movie, right? So there is a different challenge. So if you have low resources, low data, maybe 1 or 2 800, right? How do you build better models? So as Saudis was telling that he works in this energy efficient models, I also work in small language models. I think these are good, right?
So a good example, this EMNLP paper that we just recently, the iCopernicus paper that we had this time. So it's just because we didn't have the resource, the GPU resources, we started converting all the models, all these large models into JAX. And then, thanks to Google, that we got the TPU resources, and we ran all of that into TPU resources, and then we got the results. So yeah, I mean, and also writing more efficient code, and so you start thinking about a lot of different ways in which you can optimize things. When you have limited resources or constrained resources, and so on.
And just to add to this. If you look at the ways or the papers that are published, many papers published in ACL venues, CL venues these days, you see a lot of papers are on exploration of LLMs on a certain aspect, right? They just took some LLMs and they ran those LLMs on big GPUs, clusters, and they discovered something. Versus, let's say we don't have resources, we think of it in a different ways, because we know that that's not that's a different thing, and we won't be able to do that, right? And then we basically focus on model design, optimization, and so on. I think that is also a good perspective, isn't it?
Right.
But of course, this should not be an excuse. We need more GPUs, more resources to train the model.
No, even and my personal opinion is that even to come up with smaller models, you have to understand what's really going on in these LLMs and why they are.
Yeah. All right. I think these are very interesting responses. I really enjoyed. So now, just to conclude this session, I have a few general questions to all of you. Right? Feel free to raise hands to respond to this. So the first one is the way the scaling laws, right? The increasing size of LLMs and stuff like that. Do you think that an alternative paradigm is emerging, right? Which will essentially surplus the traditional AI research in general? I mean, let me rephrase. So, given that scaling laws dominate discussions, right? What alternative paradigms should we explore for advancing AI?
Or
it's a different AI altogether.
Right. So we have seen that the more data and the bigger these models are, there are emergent capabilities with every, let's say, 10 times increase in data size and model size. We are seeing some emergent properties from the models in context learning and instruction following behavior, and a lot of other stuff that probably smaller models are not that well adapted at. Now, ultimately, we have Llama 3.1, which is trained on 15 trillion tokens. And Granite models, I think, also around 12 trillion tokens. Now, ultimately, we are going to run out of data that to train on, and so the emergent properties now will cannot be from the data that is already there on the data. It has to be. That's my gut feeling that the emergent properties that will emerge from now on will be based on synthetic data.
But Gaurav, you are just talking about text.
Right.
There are images, there are videos, there are other dimensions of data set that you can collect.
That's true. Yeah, that is. Yes, and those. I'm talking from a text perspective. That what all behaviors can emerge now that we are running out of data for textual data. And my gut feeling was that as we are now, for example, now the way data is being generated is that given a query, you try to get the result using a different verification, and then pick the result and fine tune on top of it, right? So that data is basically is not something that LLM is generating as it is. It's basically you are searching on top of the result and then fine tuning it on it. And if you find, and probably if you train bigger LLMs in this with this new emergent new data that you have found using search, it might be better adopted at. It might be do a better reasoning than what what a small LLM can do. So that's what my feeling is, that new data, the void will be filled by synthetically generated data. But it's just a gut intuition. I'm not sure.
That's correct. Anybody else wants to?
Yeah, I think that there are other kind of alternative paradigms of models that are coming up, especially one of the interesting models, which do not need that much of parameters, is like the CAN model, the Kolmogorov-Arnold sort of model. It's interesting model. Of course, it's a bit of more of a claim than what. And I think that idea of the activation functions, you are learning them, and also, that leads to all sorts of possibilities, including neurosymbolic techniques, while you're applying those activation functions. It's more logic driven techniques and so on and so forth. And the very fact that do we really need that many number of features, and are those that many number of features even helping in terms of the final decision? And usually we see that much of the the parameters are sparse, right? So that leads us to that thing that, okay, we start with very large models, but how much of that large model we are actually really using in terms of the final decision, right? So I'm very hopeful in coming up with alternative paradigms, kind of like bringing back some of the stuffs of olden days logic based techniques or symbolic techniques, but at the same time trying to figure out how we can apply some of those techniques into the newer ideas that is coming out of the LLM world.
Okay, so maybe you want to say something, or maybe can I ask the next question? Maybe, yeah.
So I think they will go through their own evolution, as in any other technology, right? We have to go all in to see where it ends, right? And once it saturates, then of course alternative ways are gonna come, right? So for example, Gaurav mentioned search. So I think that is the next thing that has come very recently with O1. Right. So So basically, you equip the model with search and verification techniques, and then you have a better high quality data or high quality output, right? So I think once this saturates, then distillation of the same expertise into smaller models will definitely is gonna come in, right? I'm sure that that will happen. And then the other question is that do we really need such large language models? Do we need one model which can do everything? Or do we need specialized models? And if we have specialized tasks or specialized domains, then can smaller models suffice? And I think that is an active area of research.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Maybe the last question. So as LLMs become more integrated into our daily life, right? How do you envision their role evolving in collaborative environments with human? Because we have been talking about human AI collaboration, right? And I think it's still in fancy, just in the sense, like, I think human AI collaboration is something which is the future, right? So what do you think? I mean, what is your perspective about this, and how we as researchers can take this thing forward, so that normal citizens in our country, right, across the globe, they can also use AI more judiciously, right? What do you think? Anybody wants to take this up?
I can maybe start.
Yeah.
So I think the paradigm shift has already come, right? AI has already become an integral part of people's life, whether they may be knowing it or not, unknowingly or unknowingly.
Yeah.
For example, if you look at WhatsApp, right, there you can use Llama 3.2 model, and people do not know what they're using underneath, right? So I'll give you an example. So my wife is a doctor, and she had to create a survey or some questionnaire for some training in the hospital. right? So she opened WhatsApp and asked Llama. It gave some questions, and she used that for for training purposes in her organization. And then so a few years down the line, a few years ago, this was not imaginable. So this has already started touching people and general people who are not tech people,
who tech savvy.
Who are not tech savvy. So I think AI as an assistant is already there, where users are verified. In industry, code LLMs have become very powerful, and I'm sure almost every one of us is using them for coding. They're assisting us in coding. For drafting emails, for writing formal notices and all, general people are also using it, right? Now, envisioning AI models as an autonomous agents, I think, I don't know, maybe that is the future, but at this point in time, I don't know whether we are there yet or not. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I think we are running out of time. I will ask each one of you the last question. Okay. So to Soris, what would be your message to the students, right, who are learning LLM, generative AI, right? How would they prepare themselves for, let's say, for placement or for research?
I think first of all, don't forget the fundamentals of machine learning, the fundamentals of NLP, and if you are using LLMs for computer vision and all, the fundamental classical techniques are extremely important, because even if you look into the LLMs, if you really want to understand and then build on it and not just use it as a plug and play, because that will only take you to a certain level, and after that it will hit a wall. So that is bound to happen. You have to be very strong in the fundamentals. So that is this one thing I would say.
Okay. To both of you, let's say after taking this course, the students will call themselves experts, right, in LLMs and generative AI for text, whatever, right? So when they apply for job, let's say to IBM, for example, or to say Google, Microsoft, right? What kind of qualities you expect from candidates, right? When you take interviews, what are the qualities that you expect that they fulfill?
I think one of the things would be how much of the here what we taught was mostly let's say theorems and some ways of doing decoding, but the real use case will be if they could apply, if they can transfer that knowledge to a new problem, and if they can implement some of these approaches, or so that would be the quality that we will be looking at. How much are they able to transfer what they learned in the class to an actual real world problem? So
okay. Christine?
So I think here I kind of agree with Sarish that fundamentals are the most important.
What do you mean by fundamentals?
I'll tell you. So can you backpropagate? Can you write a function which will find the gradient of some function? That if I ask you to write the transformer layer, do you know what are the operations which are going on? Without using Hugging Face transformer, can you write a plain PyTorch code in that? Right? So see, if
you also ask, let's say, questions from linear algebra, probability statistics in the interview to that level, or no?
So I do.
You do.
I do.
Okay.
But I don't know about others. But I definitely ask questions from linear algebra, and also I ask people to write let's say a transformer layer for me. And maybe
coding
coding part, right? And so see, if a biochemical engineer is using an LLM, I don't expect him to know the nitty-gritties of the model, right? I don't expect him to know what is a transformer layer and all. But if you are hiring an ML expert, how will he push the boundaries if he doesn't know what lies inside? So I think I don't know, you said that students are gonna call themselves experts. I don't think that I am an expert in LLMs at this point in time.
Nobody can claim.
Right?
Nobody can claim. Yeah.
The pace at which the field is moving, we know very little.
So you still assess the fundamentals. That's what you're saying, right?
Absolutely. Without that, it is not possible to push the boundaries, right?
And the coding skills?
So that comes into play, right? If I'm asking him,
so what kind of coding skill, like C++, old school coding, competitive coding, or like ML coding, LLM coding?
So there are two aspects, I would say, in the research, right? One is coding the AI models. For that we need PyTorch, right? So we are not deploying models. We are researchers. We are not deploying models. We don't need knowledge of C++ and other frameworks. So we primarily focus on PyTorch and Python. And the other minor thing is whenever you have the data, you need to have the ability to analyze the data. For that, little bit knowledge of statistics and tools which are there, data frames and all, right? Can you use them or not? I think these are the two aspects that I mostly test.
Okay. The last question to Onnoy. So imagine that your next door neighbor, your brother, he is kind of hesitant. He is not very. He is very confused whether to apply abroad for higher studies versus India. What would be your message?
At least come work with us for 6 months and then decide, take an informed decision at least.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. I think this was a wonderful session. Thank you. Thanks for your opinion and responding to questions. I think audience also enjoyed this one, and hopefully some of these advices, right, might be useful for you guys to, let's say, apply for higher studies, apply for jobs in top industries, and so on and so forth. With this, we officially conclude this lecture series. I hope you enjoyed, and I also hope that you recommend this course for to your friends, to your colleagues, right? And please do feel free to write to me and write to other instructors, right? Whether you enjoyed the course or not, and what are the aspects you thought might have been better in terms of quality. Thank you very much.